Yeah. Look at that sexy motherfucker.
What is up, buddy?
How
Fuck,
are
it's
you?
been a long time, man.
It
It's
has
been a
been
long
a minute,
time.
man. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. You look well.
Good.
Does this sound okay?
It sounds okay.
Sounds okay. All right.
Yeah.
It's not your mic, but
Yeah. Well, I got the blue mic, man. These guys gave me this mic about a half year back, and it's fucking deadly, man.
the blue mic, eh? I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, and they're cheap, man. I think they're under a couple $100.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think they go for 150 to 200 or something like that.
Yeah, they're not expensive. So
I have a Comrex machine I can set up. I can go get my other mixer but if this is okay, then I can just
I mean, it sounds okay. Do you
okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah,
All right.
it's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was texting with you the other day and saying you were like one of the original guests on episode number 1, which is now 7 years ago, dude.
I can't believe you've been doing this for 7 years.
Right? Crazy.
And you're still sexy after all this time.
It's the shitty beard, I think, is what's helping here.
I got my I got my.
Oh, you look like a pirate or something. Like
I know. I can almost curl. I can just eat
watch
some
for
mustache
Seaball
wax.
in the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Taking over for Johnny Depp there.
Yeah, when they go straight to DVD, right before DVD is completely obsolete.
Right. So welcome back to the podcast, James. I guess the question on everybody's mind is like, how's the camp? How's your circle with COVID? And it just seems to be kind of monopolizing everybody's time, for the last fucking year. Interesting year, hey?
It's been unique, right? What are the most overused words over the last 11 months? Unique, challenging, difficult, troubling, unsettling. You know what? I will say this. I've never appreciated where I live more than this past year. And we live in South Delta and down around Boundary Bay. We're about 2 blocks from the ocean down at the beach. And so we can kind of see through where we are. And we built planter boxes in the garden this year. And so we decided to make veggies. And and so the one thing I do feel like we've got on our side is we've got space. There's an old school that's now a farming school about a block over from us. That's a dog park. So, we can kind of run around with the dog, and we're one of those millions of people that got a COVID dog. And we've got that going for us. And then, to have the space at the beach and to kind of run along the dike, that's been kind of nice for us. I struggled turning into a suburbanite when I first moved back to the West Coast about 8 years ago. And man, I this past year was a reminder that, wow, okay, I feel really good about, no longer being the city slicker, to kind of have that space for the kids to move around. And, we're good, man. Like I would say, for me, working from home as somebody who's had to commute. Now, the downside about being a suburbanite is the commute. And so I don't miss my commute. I probably get about an hour to an hour and a half of my day back every day.
Right.
I think when the kids were at home all the time, not going to school last spring, that was a little more of a, what the fuck? How am I going to get this done? As I'm sure everybody felt like that. But I think we've managed all right, and to have the space, and we got 4 kids in the house. Like we try to be pretty tight about ours, because I guess it sounds probably weird, but we kind of have a robust bubble to begin with. So between my better half, Brenda, and I, we kind of pulled a Brady Bunch a few years ago. So her 2 daughters and my 2 daughters. So we got 4 girls in the house beyond just the 2 of us. So with all them, and then we've got our respective exes as well. So there's my ex-wife, and so there's another one to our sort of bubble, if you will. And then, Bren's ex-husband and, his new wife and their new child. So, on a good day, our bubble, overall, it's about 10 people, right? So not to say that we go hang out with our exes and all that, but there's peace in the valley, and
Yeah.
the kids will go to the, 1 week that my kids will be at my place, and then the next week they'll go to their mom's, and we're just trying to be mindful of the fact that that's where we're at. So if you're bringing, or if you're exposed to anything, so in that sense. But I don't know about you, man, but like, the
I don't know, dude.
the limitation of sports programs, rec programs, like I've loved having family dinners at night where for years it's been, holy crap, eat this grilled cheese sandwich, got to get out the door because you got to be at practice in 10 minutes, right? Well, we got to get up to the pool, we got to get to the soccer field, and for everything to just kind of chill the hell out. There was an element that I kind of really liked to kind of say, man, like this whole rat race thing, I get it. Life is busy at this stage of our lives, but I kind of enjoyed a little bit of the Hakuna Matata.
Yeah, totally. Like if there's the silver lining in COVID and the pandemic, it's the family time. And actually, like you say, you're having dinners now, and it's not a rushed world, and there's just more, more cuddling and watching movies.
Yeah. My spoon game is through the roof.
Right. And going like on hikes and stuff. I don't know if you guys do that as well, but like we try to do that. And like, we play road hockey, which is the only time that we truly are fucking with the bubble. We play road hockey on Sundays.
Yeah.
But it's generally the same people. And like, let's be honest, we have kids, and you want to talk bubbles. Those kids have fucking no self-restraint, right? Like they're literally, it's not like social distancing. They're like social climbing on each other. Like so once you get to that point, like, I don't know, man, fuck. I'm just ready for it to take a hike.
No, I think a lot of people are done with it. And, and it's funny because I find myself, if you see somebody at a grocery store, or, you're out walking and you talk to somebody, and, you see the varying levels of people that are just, I am so done with this. I am dying, and this is killing me, and just what it's done to my headspace. And I'm totally empathetic of that, right? I've taken phone calls from my parents over the last year, and my parents have been together for, more than a half a century, married, and it's wonderful. But then they've really been serious about being mindful of, of COVID. But they also live in a very rural part of Eastern Ontario, and when it's just the two of them all the time, you kind of get tired of each other's shit, right? Like you don't have that social, like we didn't go up and visit this past summer. My sister didn't go up with her family to visit, right? So it's just mom and dad, and you go through the gamut of the board games, and you go through Coronation Street, and I've taken calls from them over the last year at different times, like, I just need a fucking break. Sorry, mom. Sorry, dad, for outing you. And, and that's sort of an element. Though. Yeah. And so when you're in those small bubbles, and I'm really empathetic for people that don't have that social network, or don't, if you live alone, if you're single, and that sort of element, I'm sure this probably been, a real kick in the ass. And that's really hard. And as somebody who's been there in the past, obviously not through a pandemic, like I get it. Like I went through a divorce, and man, it was really hard on my mind going back a number of years ago. But at the same time, I sometimes quiet in the sense that, I work in broadcasting, so I know that, like, I can lose my job in any minute because, there's somebody cheaper and younger, and just, they're, restructuring, and just the media industry is going crazy. But at the same time, man, like this past year, I've been thankful, and I try to keep my head down a little bit, in the sense that, man, like, weather's pretty good on this side of the country for the last year. I can stretch my legs. I mean, my biggest complaint sometimes is when it's too windy to go for a run. Like, if I'm pissing and moaning about the wind being my first world problem, then
right,
I feel like I'm doing okay. Like the kids have been in a good headspace, and yeah, man, like I honestly, like I probably get a little Zoom chat out, a little too much of that sometimes, but I can't complain too much about the year that we've had.
Yeah, true. And you're mentioning the broadcast part. You've basically been, part of sports broadcasting in Canada for like 3 decades. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you know what? I started at Score in the late 90s.
Right.
I got out of school in 95, so I'm kind of turning into an old man, I guess, but yeah, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and now into it's like fourth decade, man.
Four,
Oh my
baby.
God. Like the two of us are turning into like the Red Robinsons of the next generation.
Oh my God, no kidding. Well, how long have we known each other? You used to come on when I was doing the afternoon show at CFOX. You come on like, at least once every couple of weeks, once a week, maybe.
I was going to say, like, I can remember us meeting at the Malones down at like Richards and Seymour.
Yeah.
And that's got to be close to 20 years
Like
now.
it's got to be close to 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's been.
We're playing the NHL hockey game. We'll get into you being the voice, the play-by-play and all that. The first time I turned it on, I was like, what the fuck? It's James. My kids are like, oh, you know him? I'm like, yeah, it's like a buddy of mine. He used to come on my radio show and like, well, let's get into how did you get that gig, man? Like there had to be tons of people applying for that, man.
So for me, it was, this is about 3 years ago now. I was doing a podcast with one of your former Toddcast podcast guests, Davis Sanchez.
Okay. Yeah.
So Davis, who now is an analyst over at TSN. So Jesse and I were talking one day randomly because we do this podcast. So we were just always chatting, and he had a really good friend that was a producer for Electronic Arts, which is the parent company, EA Sports, the NHL video game. And he just kind of mentioned that they needed a play-by-play. They were looking for a new broadcast team. And I remember just kind of, Reggie. And I said, do you think you could ask your buddy if I could get an audition? Because I hadn't heard about it. And he had mentioned that they were kind of running through a gamut of a number of broadcasters, and there were a number of names that I was familiar with. And I was like, man, I'd just love to take a swing at the plate. And he said, yeah, I can ask. And a couple of days later, I got an email from a member of the HR department at Electronic Arts based out of Los Angeles. And they just said, hey, look, your name's come up. We'd like to schedule an audition for you. And so I went in for the audition. And the funny thing was, Hancock, we had won a trip to Maui for the family at an event that I had been emceeing and read the winning ticket. That went over well with the crowd when we were still allowed to gather. And we were ready to fly to Maui that afternoon. I got off the air from Sportsnet 650 that morning, raced to the studios from downtown Vancouver to Burnaby, and then did my audition. And they kind of threw me a whole bunch of different video clips, and they just said, go for it, man. Like, doesn't matter about getting names right, and just kind of call it like you see it. And, just kind of did it. And I've kind of a high energy type of person to begin with, and just kind of had fun with it and just kind of let myself go. And,
awesome.
I think I heard some giggling, and I think a couple times that, when you kind of pop the room, and the people kind of behind the scenes, and, I kind of like, all right, maybe I'm doing something right here. And I remember leaving the studio, and, the producers and the audio team were all really nice. And I remember thinking to myself, man, this place is cool. I don't know what the hell just happened, but I think it was fun. And then race to the school to grab the kids, and then off to the airport to go to Maui for a week. And,
nice.
and the timing of it, you get on a beach and you're on vacation, just kind of forgot about it. And I didn't hear anything back for about a month. And out of the blue, I got an email just saying, hey, we've reached a short list, and you're still on it.
So by that time, like a month later, do you already think like, fuck, I didn't get it?
Part of me had forgotten about it. And then I think it popped in my mind like, oh yeah, I did that audition. And that was cool. And, and I remember, what, honestly, Todd, my thought was, I'm just happy that I took a shot.
Got a chance to do it.
Yeah. I don't care if I failed. I'm glad I did it. That was honestly, I was just happy that I had that experience. And I was okay with that.
Did you hear who was on the short list?
They were pretty limited. I heard a few names, and I don't want to mention it. I don't want to mention some of the other names. I think there were, I think there were broadcasters here in Vancouver. There were broadcasters, I think, from Calgary, from Edmonton, from, a lot of different parts of the U.S. as well along the West Coast. That I think my understanding was there were at least 24 broadcasters or play-by-play guys and a lot of NHL voices, from all over that had come up for this. And so, I mean, that's the other thing. When you look at the names that have done the NHL game, it's like Jim Houston, who's been like Hockey Night in Canada, Gary Thorne, who was the voice of hockey for years for ESPN. And then, Doc Emmerich, who's been the voice of hockey for NBC. Like, you're talking about like 3 Hall of Fame broadcasters, and then, you're bringing somebody else and like, you got stuck with, huh? But anyway, I get a message from, and they said, hey, look, we've shortlisted. We'd like for you to come back and do a chemistry test. And so, or no, sorry, they said, we'll let you know in the next week or so, and we should have a decision in the next week to 10 days. Cool. I'm like, still in the game. Well, another month goes by. It's like, well, I guess I didn't hear back. I guess they went in another direction, but hey, you know what? At least I got shortlisted. Nice. Again, I'm just happy to be nominated, just happy to be considered. Yeah. And then a month later, there's like, we'd like for you to come in for a chemistry test. And you're like, whoa, okay, this is getting serious. And I go in, and who do I run into in the parking lot is Ray Ferraro. And Ray, obviously 400 goals in the NHL, and great analyst with TSN, and Ray and I had worked together in different capacities in years past. And, I'm a big Ray fan, and I kind of saw Ray, and I'm like, man, I know they're big fans of yours. I mean, you've been involved in the game in years past. And he just kind of remarked to me backwards. He's like, hey man, all I know is just keep doing what you're doing, because it sounds like you really hit a home run with that audition. And it was like, oh, okay. And so we went in, and I think it went well. For about 15 minutes, we just kind of riffed off each other, and they liked what they heard. And we got to, and then about another month later, they wanted me to come in for a third audition. And that's where there was a conversation with one of the lead producers, David Pritchard, who kind of laid out to me saying, look, here's the deal. We really like what you can bring to this, but you're also a bit of an unknown commodity from, a conventional broadcast, in the sense that, I think there's people that would be familiar with me in Canada, having worked here in Vancouver, having worked in Ottawa and Toronto over the years, and being on, on national networks, but not necessarily in a play-by-play capacity. And especially, having zero currency really in America. So they said, look, give us one more audition, play it a little more straight this time. And we just want to make sure we can kind of sell it to the bosses. So I went in, and just briefly, and they said, you know what, I think we got what we need, and hopefully we'll know in a week. And that was like the most agonizing week, because now like you want something, and you're like, it's right there, and I'm just like, I want it so fucking bad. And finally, after, oh my God, anytime there was a text, an email, a call, is this it? Is this it? Oh my God. And finally on the Friday, about like a full week later, I got a call from Sean Ramjagsingh, who's one of the lead producers for the game, and just said, hey man, how are you? I'm good. It's just want to let you know, we'd like for you to be the new voice for NHL 20. And, and Hancock, I'm sure you'll appreciate this, because, us graybeards now have been doing this for a while. I've been fortunate enough to do some really cool things in my life from this career. But to still kind of get a moment like that, man, that was probably one of the most fulfilling feelings of my life, considering to grow up playing that video game as a kid, and then to think to get paid to be in a video game all these years later. Like, all that time playing Donkey Kong and Pac-Man, it's finally paid off, brother.
That's very cool, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How long did it roughly do you think it took you from start to finish voicing everything?
From the audition or the actual game?
The actual game, like getting into studio, banging it out.
We did. I'm contracted for somewhere in the neighborhood of about 250 to 300 hours annually.
Wow.
Yeah. So we do lots of days, you kind of start in the fall and usually it's at least one day a week in the fall. And then by the time after Christmas, we start getting up and running with at least 2 days a week, generally in the new year. And usually, 4 or 5 hour voice sessions and just kind of roll with it.
Wow.
And we've been doing it from home since, we figured out the technology, how to do it since pretty much, I'm going to say April of last year. And we worked right through voicing, NHL 21 through until I think the middle of August. And then the game came out and then we were up and running within no time to start voicing again.
Crazy. Well, we hear your voice every day in my house, man. We play it every day.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So my kids were like, can we ask a question? I'm like, yeah, of course. What do you want to ask them? So my youngest, Levi, who's 8.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite NHL goaltender?
Right now?
Yeah.
Carey Price.
Oh.
I'm still a Carey Price guy. I mean, I'll never forget with the World Juniors were here in Vancouver in 2006. And in that December in training camp, Carey Price was one of the goalies, and he had just been drafted 5th overall by the Montreal Canadiens. And Price got cut. That was the year, if people remember, it was Justin Pogge who stole the show for Team Canada here in Vancouver. And so here was Carey Price, and I'll never forget sitting in the lobby at the Weston Bayshore by the waterfront out by Quail Harbor. And there was a bunch of the team. They had just taken their team pictures. They all kind of had their Team Canada warm-ups. And I remember a handful of the kids who had been cut, and Carey Price was one of them. And I just remember the kids are all kind of sitting there quietly, and Price just kind of said it to whoever was within earshot to listen. But he just kind of said, I'm going to come back here next year and I'm going to dominate. He just said it so matter-of-factly, basically fuck this. This sucks. I'm coming back next year and I'm going to own this thing. And you know what? A year later, we went to Leksand, Sweden. And that was the Carey Price and Jonathan Toews show where he put on a classic. And you look at how his career skyrocketed to where I think there were some people when he got taken 5th overall thinking, man, that's a reach to take a goalie that high and him. And you know what? He went from gold at the World Juniors into later that spring going to the American Hockey League. You think about that as a teenager, and dominates and takes the Hamilton Bulldogs American Hockey League, the Habs farm team, to the Calder Cup, and they win the championship. So he's got World Junior gold, and he backstops a pro hockey team to the championship. And then the next season, there he is with the Montreal Canadiens, and here we are in 2021. Look, I think the Habs have kind of, been up and down over the last few years, and I get that Price hasn't won a cup yet, but I'll tell you what, if the fate of the world is on the line right now and I need a goaltender, I'll take Carey Price as my guy right now.
He had an awesome battle last night with Holtby.
It was great. I didn't think Carey Price would give up 5 goals, though, as I just pumped the guy's tires.
I never would have thought that Holtby would give up 5 goals.
But I'll tell you what, the way with hockey being back and no exhibition games, it's kind of lent for a little bit of it's lent for some erratic play. And, when you get out of that structured system sometimes, that's where fun hockey comes from. Because now it's up and down, it's scrambly, and that's where you start getting goals. So, look, it might drive coaches nuts, but as somebody who likes goals, bring it on.
Everybody loves goals, man. That 3-on-3 has got to be the best fucking hockey, ever.
It's great.
It's awesome. What's your take on the fake crowd noise?
I hated the concept of it.
Same.
I hated the concept of it, but it actually has won me over in a big way. The approach of it And I think soccer nailed it. If you watch some of the European broadcasts, I think they've really done a nice job in terms of blending in some of the crowd chanting and the humming and the applause and just, I really think it's been seamless. I think when you look at what they've done with the UFC to not have any crowds and just go in a more intimate setting, I think the UFC's been great. Football's been pretty good. I think football's been pretty good. And I think the NHL's been all right. It was interesting, the league, and I don't know the full details of it, but I know that the NHL reached out to the EA Sports NHL broadcast team and to ask for some advice how to approach the NHL's return to play in the bubble in Edmonton and Toronto last year with the crowd noise. And and I think one of the pieces of advice that the EA Sports team had suggested to the NHL is treat it like a neutral site game, right? So treat it as a neutral crowd. So anytime there's a goal, everybody's cheering. There's cheers for the crowd, for the home team, the cheers for the away team. You just treat it more a neutral site. And I think I'll say this: I've liked it way more than I thought I would when it came to the piped in crowd noise. Because my first thought was, oh my God, this is terrible.
What a cheesy idea.
It totally, I was like, no, I do not like this idea. And you know what? The more I watched, and we've got some really talented people in this industry. And I think it's really been on display. And I don't know if they've got enough credit for what they've done for the audio technicians and engineers over the last year when it comes to sports and the return to play.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. I guess I am
like
coming around to it, but man, I tell you, I fucking hated it for the longest of time.
The theory of it, I hated.
Yeah.
But the execution of it it's been pleasant for me.
I guess what I think that they're missing is that we're never, hopefully, ever going to have this again in our lifetime. And here's a chance where they could have, like the UFC, done no crowd noise at all, and now we can hear the play-by-plays being created on ice with Besser passing to Peterson. You know what I mean? Like there's that aspect that they're losing. They're missing out on something that is unique to what we're doing present day.
I think a lot of players who thrive on the energy of a crowd have struggled with this to try to manufacture that adrenaline.
Yeah.
I look at, I'll tell you one industry that I feel like it's been really tough to watch. I'm an old wrestling nerd. I think we talked about this on my last podcast, right?
You shared an awesome
Brutus Beefcake story. Yeah. And awesome. So, for me, watching wrestling when they came back into, I never fully appreciated how important fans were for wrestling, and to lose that energy of a crowd, I think it's just taken so much energy. Now they've created virtual fans and to set up everybody kind of on Zoom and Skype and connecting that way on these LED screens. It's been something, but I think they've really struggled with that. I think to go into on Saturday night, I'm going to go into Rogers Arena and cover the Canucks and Habs game. And it'll be the first game that I'll be in watching with no fans. And I'm fascinated to see how it'll be, because my guess is it's going to be just an intense scrimmage, or what it'll be, right? Because there's no fans that are screaming and cheering, right? You think you'll hear guys dropping F-bombs. And I think partly that's why leagues don't necessarily want to just have that unfettered audio, because, let's face it. I mean, there's a lot of
trash talking.
I think there's a lot of talking, and man, like in the heat of the moment, I mean, even think of like a beer league game, right? I think there's still just your traditional, pucks, pucks in deep, but like everything's probably got an F-bomb or, a shit or, and then the other stuff that probably, would get a lot of people in some serious trouble now, where, I think people are more mindful of their language, but I'm sure there's still a portion of it that exists out there. And I don't think the leagues want to go down that slope when they're just trying to, minimize the damage and the losses that they've already taken financially, right? Like the NHL, half their revenue comes from fans in the stands. Like they're still a gate-driven industry in a lot of ways compared to the TV contracts that the NFL and the NBA get. And this is, so I think they're just like, man, we're just trying to hang on and survive and take the revenue that we still have access to with these TV contracts. But they're losing. I mean, I think the NHL even kind of said, like, the losses that we're incurring right now is in the B, not in the M.
Wow. Saturday night, you're at the arena. Same night, you're a UFC Bellator. You're a fight fan, right?
Yeah, I enjoy the big fight. I feel like the sport is at a point right now where they need more stars.
Yeah, it's saturated. There's too many fights. I agree 100%. They need more stars.
I
think the big ones are fighting this weekend. Like, what's your take on the McGregor Poirier 2?
Connor sells, man. He sells a lot of fights, and he is, I think, he's still the gold standard in terms of the name recognition of what mixed martial arts and combat sports are all about, right? I mean, Conor McGregor is the face of that sport. He may not be the best fighter, but he is the face of that sport, that nobody goes out and sells a fight like Conor McGregor, right? To talk shit and to draw people in to buy pay-per-views and watch, and to buy tickets, whether you want to see him kick ass or you are paying for tickets to see him get his ass kicked, right? And it kind of goes back to the notion of, Muhammad Ali. Ali could talk people into a barn, right? Like he could talk people into an arena, by selling fights, and he backed it up. When you think back in the 1960s and the early 70s, he wanted to go to heaven, so I took him down in 7. I'm going to knock him out in 4 rounds. But that sort of stuff. And that's Muhammad Ali, who was influenced by a pro wrestler in the 1950s by the name of Gorgeous George, right? And so that whole element of theater where, yes, professional wrestling is kind of the hijinks and the sports entertainment, but you need to be an entertainer as well in the fight game in order to have an appeal. You look at Floyd Mayweather, for that matter. Like, Floyd Mayweather wasn't necessarily the nicest guy and not necessarily the best human being, but he was a phenomenal fighter, but he talks shit, right? And then he'd back it up. And I think that's where the UFC, and look, it's really hard to sit there and be a great fighter and then to expect somebody to have that personality and go out there and, talk trash or be a hype man and sell the fights. Some guys, less is more. Some people can just be total wrecking machines like a Brock Lesnar and just be an ass kicker, not necessarily a great talker. Conor McGregor is the total package in that. You look at guys in the years past where Chael Sonnen was that guy, right? But you have to win fights too to back it up. Josh Koscheck too. They were great talkers,
right?
But those great talkers have to be able to win fights too, because if the guy who's talking smack all the time saying, Hancock, you and me in the cage, I'm gonna knock you out, and then I go get knocked out that weekend, well, then I get up the following match, the next time the fight, and it's like, you know what? Next person, I'm going to knock him out in the second round. I'm taking him out. And then I get knocked out again. And so, you get that fatigue that there's a certain point that I think the viewing audience will buy that hype man for, you might have maybe 3 strikes and you're out, right? You start losing too many fights, then people have seen you get your ass kicked enough and you're going, I'm less inclined to watch that. McGregor got humbled, a couple of years ago, but I think there's still enough currency in terms of what he can do that appeals. And, it's a good fight this weekend. I still struggle sometimes with the politics of the UFC and trying to set up the fights that people want. It feels like it's starting to kind of stretch into boxing a little bit. But, I just think that one thing about MMA as a whole is that now you've got different leagues where you've got Bellator, you've got the UFC,
Strike Force,
and you've got these different outlets, which is great for a fighter. But at the same time, that if you want the best fights, you want the best fighters, and I think still the best talent resides in the UFC. But you need more personalities. Like I go back, man, 10 years ago. You think of the guys that you could rattle off that were legitimate main event fights, but you'd get a few of them on a card. Like, and you think of the Iceman and Randy Couture and the Axe Murderer and GSP and BJ Penn and Brock Lesnar and,
Nick Diaz and
the Diaz brothers have been around for years, but you could list off all these different names that were legitimate, Frankie Edgar, like all these names that you can kind of go off one after the other. And a lot of that generation is kind of gone. And now you're kind of looking at it, and don't get me wrong, I think the top end fighters are great fighters, but there's just not enough of them. And there's not enough of them that seem to appeal to a mass audience that say, hey, you know what? This guy's got personality. Like John Jones. John Jones is the best fighter in the history of the sport. But how many times have you seen John Jones fight in the last half decade?
Well, he's got to stop using.
And that's a whole other issue where, his personal demons have gotten the best of him. But good looking, charismatic, good
Killer
talker, fighter. And an incredible fighter. To me, he should have been the Ali in a lot of ways of this sport, and should have been and marketable. Like, man, that's a charismatic guy who could sell. And unfortunately, John Jones just cannot get out of his own way. And that's what's unfortunate. I think it's really hurt the sport that, the best athlete in the sport's history and the best fighter in the sport's history has been maybe the biggest problem in the sport's history.
Interesting, right? So who takes it? Connor?
I'll take Connor. Yeah, I like Connor to win this one. I think he's, I think he's still serious enough about, backing it up. And I think the UFC wants to put him in a position to succeed. Look, it's better business for the UFC if Conor McGregor is successful, right? I mean, he sells fights. Like, look at the buy rate. Like, it wasn't that long ago. We're talking 4 years ago where he stepped inside a ring, out of his element and fought Floyd Mayweather. And was there ever a thought he was really going to win? No, but Connor went out there, and I think anybody who paid for that fight, which was around $100, I think everybody kind of walked away and said, you know what, that was fun.
Yeah,
it was entertaining. Like, I got my money's worth.
Whatever it was, right? Like
it wasn't a farce.
Yeah.
It went 10 rounds. You saw some guys throwing punches. And at the end of the day, 4 million people bought that on pay-per-view. Like 4 million pay-per-view buys. Like, it shattered records.
Right. And now there's talk of Pacquiao, which I think McGregor won't stand a chance.
Well, I mean, look, if you're putting a fighter, if you're putting a boxer in the ring against somebody who's not a boxer, when it comes and putting them in an actual boxing match, the boxer's going to win, right? It's, in certain elements, like if you put Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao inside, an octagon,
well, game over.
The fighter generally has no chance, right? You get taken down, you suddenly lose the ability.
You're choked out. You're on your back. Like, what the fuck just happened?
Well, and that's it. Then we saw that about 10 years ago. James Toney stepped inside the ring, or James Toney stepped inside the cage to fight Randy Couture. And, James Toney was he was a world champion boxer. But as soon as he got taken down to the ground, James Toney was not a world champion boxer anymore. He was, there was no punching to be able to be effective when you're on the ground, right? And so, Couture made short work of James Toney. You go back, there's a great book that was written in the last couple of years that speaks to about 1976. It was which is kind of deemed as the birth of MMA. There was a Japanese company that had reached out to Muhammad Ali and wanted to have an exhibition with this world champion wrestler, Antonio Inoki, who was basically the Hulk Hogan of Japan. Okay. And they had signed and paid Ali millions of dollars to have this match against Antonio Inoki. And so the deal was done. And then when it kind of came to the night, the promoters wanted Ali to lose to Antonio Inoki, to which Ali was like, I'm not losing this fight. And Inoki was like, well, I'm not losing this fight. And so kind of like all bets were off, and they stepped into the ring where Ali had to wear his gloves, and they went 15 rounds. And Inoki was terrified of the idea of getting punched and thought his only shot was to win this thing was to take down Ali, but he didn't want to stand up with him. So for 15 rounds, and like if you find this on YouTube, but Inoki basically walked around a ring on like a crab and throwing kicks. And Ali stood up, trying to get this guy to come up. Now, you see what people do now. You start standing up. Some guy can be a stand-up fighter. Some guy might be a wrestler. And, you see what MMA has become now. But for 15 rounds, 3-minute 15 rounds, it was a dog's breakfast that people were subjected to, ordering this on pay-per-view, watching a guy walk around on his hands and his legs, terrified to get punched by the heavyweight champion of the world. And so thankfully it's evolved much more than that for the sport, but they need more personalities, Todd.
Right. Yeah, fair. Oh, my second question, my eldest, James.
Hi, James.
He wants to know, what is your favorite sport?
That's a great question, man. It's funny. I probably would lean towards, I guess, hockey nowadays. I was such an NFL guy growing up. I like to consider myself a sports fan. I guess if you got to pin me down to one, I'll go with hockey. But I just love to I always thought of myself as a well-rounded guy. Like, man, the NBA Finals, there's nothing better for me. When you got two great teams matching up in a 7-game series in basketball. There's no team I'm probably more passionate about than the Chicago Bears at this stage of my life in the National Football League. And to go to Chicago finally as a fan after all these years to Soldier Field about a year and a half ago was unbelievable. But I guess I'd probably say hockey.
Cool. Well, let's get outside of sports here for a little bit, James. I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick here. I know we've already been on for 45, so
already.
I know, right? Time flies.
I'm a talker.
So what was the music like in the Cybulski house as a kid growing up? What are your parents playing? What do you be influenced by as a little tyke?
Well, my parents always had 580 CFRA on in the house growing up in Ottawa. And that was their brand. And we went from listening, it was an all hit station when I was little, and it went from all hit radio to oldie station to talk radio. But we were kind of an all over the map. Like my mom she kind of loved her pop music and disco. My dad loved his Elvis Presley and Motown. And my older sister, she was about 6 years older than me. So kind of early 80s, she was big into mod, if you remember that, or new wave and punk. So I was definitely an all over the map. As a kid, I think everybody on the planet loved Michael Jackson as a kid. Yeah. But, I absolutely love the Motown sound, love the doo-wop. And so definitely there was a lot of, I guess, oldies. The oldie station was definitely large and in charge. So a lot of 50s and 60s, folk country, that sort of, Johnny Cash and Marty Robbins that my dad would always be whistling, or Waylon Jennings and that sort of element. And then I kind of had the influence from my sister, who kind of taught me to keep it real with a little bit of Adamant or Madness with Our House. And somewhere along the way, I took my love of Motown and Michael Jackson and what my sister was digging and my parents, and kind of created my own sort of taste, which is that eclectic hodgepodge of anything that ranges from Public Enemy to Guns N' Roses, to the Foo Fighters, to Kendrick Lamar, and to the soundtrack of Frozen.
Yeah. You were saying last time, I think you were getting a little bit into jazz, you were saying.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'll tell you what, I love horns.
Same.
I love horns. And
There's a
so
pause for a second. A local band in Vancouver with horns, check out a band called Small Town Artillery. Fucking great band.
Small Town Artillery. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I will check them out. You know, but like Nathaniel Rateliff.
Yeah. Great.
And you know, and to see what, like, you know, just bringing in the horns, you know, just love a song that gets me hyped. I like 25 or 624, like, you know, from Chicago.
Yeah.
You know, boom. You want to get me fired up? Just give me some horns. And to this day, if the kids aren't in the car and it's just Brenda and I driving and I'm just DJing and I'm riding shotgun, like, I will drive her fucking bananas because I'm just playing something loud. I'll put some Stevie Wonder on, or just something that's got some horns, and just, you know, the shimmy shake in the car, and, you know, all of it. That's totally me. Some harmonies, some harmonizing, and some horns. You can't go wrong.
Love it. What was your first concert?
Maestro Fresh Wes.
That's right. You know, I think I did ask you last time about that.
The godfather of Canadian hip hop, which all years later, to be able to, I helped organize a charity event in support of relief for the Haiti earthquake in 2010. And Maestro was part of it. And like, totally, you know, I would consider Stroh a friend now.
Yeah.
Or Wes, if you will. But at the time, like, to kind of just like, oh my God, this is Maestro Fresh West. Like, oh no, let your backbone slide. Oh, I'm like, you're trying to be cool. Like, you're trying to be cool, but, you know, just totally like, oh my God, it's Maestro. And yeah. So I was definitely, that was concert number one. That, and probably, I think, a live performance of Today's Special.
Right.
If you remember that kids' TV series.
Yeah.
I don't know if that counts as a concert or not. Maybe.
I don't think so. Wes is probably your first. Yeah.
Okay.
What's the most overrated band on the planet?
Ooh. Oh boy. You know, I mean, Nickelback always feels like the easy answer, right? In a lot of ways, but overrated. You know what? You know, there was a long time, I'm going to get killed for this, but there was a time that I wasn't necessarily the biggest hip fanatic. And, you know, there were songs I liked, but the way that people were so fanatical about them at times, I was kind of like, And if you go back to 2016, the night they had their final concert and the CBC carried it live, you know, I watched that, and, you know, halfway through the concert, it kind of hit me that, my God, like, these guys have been the soundtrack for like the formative years of my life, through high school, through college, you know, into my young professional career. And I teared up. Like, I had tears streaming down my eyes, where I don't think I fully appreciated them until I was older. And I certainly appreciate them now and find myself listening to them way more than I ever did younger. But I think there was a time where I looked at the hip as kind of being those guys. You know, I wouldn't say that now, but, you know, definitely learned to appreciate. But most overrated, hold on, let me come back to me on that in a minute. Let me have a slow burn on that for a second here. I feel like there's something there. I'll see if I can come up with a hot take on it.
What are you binge watching lately?
Yellowstone right now. Yellowstone.
I heard it's awesome.
It is, yeah. So it's funny because, like, there's 3 seasons, and I just saw like the previews for this in the last month, and finally decided, okay, well, why not give it a try? I guess the best way to describe it is how a lot of people have kind of summed it up to me when I kind of threw it out on Twitter saying, is this worth sticking out with? And people have described it as Sons of Anarchy on horses.
Awesome.
Hopefully it ends. Hopefully, I mean, Sons of Anarchy kind of just got a little too much for me after
I think
a while.
It probably could have wrapped up by season 4.
Yes, totally agree.
Instead of 7.
Season 4 would have been just fine. So Yellowstone is kind of where I'm at right now, and waiting to dive into season 3 of Cobra Kai as well as waiting for me.
Are you doing that Cobra Kai?
It's amazing. You didn't like it?
I didn't. Not enough to watch more than maybe 4 episodes.
Okay. I mean, the one thing is it's an easy watch, right? Each episode's only about 25 minutes.
Yeah, they're fast.
So those
I just couldn't do it. I mean, I don't know. I guess I probably eventually will, but I don't know. I just, those late nights where you're a little bit high and like, it's not really doing what I was hoping it was going to do.
No, I hear you. Your Honor is supposed to be another one that I want to kind of dive into.
What was that chess one? Did you ever watch that chess one?
I did not, but I've heard a lot of people kind of dive into that. Yeah,
dude, it's really good, man. It was like, I was like, again, high.
Yeah,
like, maybe I'll try this out. First episode, like, wow, man, this is really good, really well acted, really well written.
There was the series that the 2 series that Brenda and I kind of really dove into in the last year. In the fall, we got into The Boys.
Yeah,
which is like a real dark superhero series.
Great show. If nobody's seen that, like, get on that.
It's aggressive. And if you don't like gore, then maybe not. And the other one was there's a Netflix series called The Last Kingdom. That it's basically, if you're a big Game of Thrones fan, it's light on the fantasy element, but if you like, swords and knights and all that sort of stuff, it moves at a much faster pace than Game of Thrones, where there's lots of fighting, lots of battling, but we've kind of enjoyed that series for.
Did you get into Vikings?
You know what? We haven't. My mom's big into Vikings.
Good.
But I've heard nothing but wonderful things about it. But I have not done Vikings yet. So put it on I'll add it to the list.
Do it, yeah. Are you a fan of all the superhero movies that get made?
Amazing. You know what? I am. I'm a huge Marvel Cinematic Universe. The movies that they have done have been phenomenal. I absolutely have loved them, and I'm ready to kind of dive into WandaVision. I think we'll start next week on that. That
is some trippy ass shit, dude.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. It's a different, but like the one thing that like Marvel hasn't fucked it up at all when it comes to movies. And I'm a DC guy at heart. Like I'm a Batman guy. Like my first word as a kid was Batman.
Yeah.
And I just, the expectations for are always so high when there's a Batman movie coming out. And they started off pretty good with the Michael Keaton movies, and then they just totally ruined that franchise by the end. And the nipples on the costume, and like, what are you doing? The Val Kilmer and George Clooney ones. And, then Christopher Nolan absolutely nailed it with the trilogy there with the Dark Knights. But man, you look at how many times a DC has kind of missed on stuff, like what they did with Suicide Squad. It's like, God, man, really? And even Justice League, it was okay, but man, it could have been so much better. I feel like they've got something going here with Wonder Woman. I didn't love the follow-up here that I just watched over the Christmas holidays.
The 1984.
Yeah, it was 2.5 hours. It did. You know what?
Haven't seen it yet.
It doesn't need to be 2.5 hours. You could have shaved easily 45 minutes off from it. But there's something there with that franchise. I actually thought I thought Ben Affleck was fantastic as Batman, but we'll see where they ultimately go with the whole. The Snyder cut of Justice League, but you compare DC and how they've handled things from a film standpoint and Marvel and how they've handled things. I mean, Marvel, if you go back, there's a great story. It was just shared to me recently from a comic book shop owner that it wasn't that long ago that at one point Marvel was losing so much money, they put Iron Man on the block. They put Iron Man up, the character, for sale. And it was about, I think they were asking somewhere about $800,000 to $1 million at the time. And this is like within the last 20 years. And I remember, and the story goes like, I remember this comic book shop owner saying that, there were a few of us that kind of got together and networked and like, hey, can we raise enough capital to buy this and see what we can do with it and see what we can do. Now, Marvel ultimately chose not to sell, right? And look at now that
wisely,
and where Robert Downey Jr. essentially turned maybe a B minus Marvel character into an A-lister and probably up there in the conversation with Spider-Man now in terms of their popular franchise characters for Marvel superheroes, right? Like that's
100%. Like without Jon Favreau's Iron Man, they don't have that bar. Like
totally,
dude, that movie is like still today, present day, one of the best Marvel films ever made.
That the significance. I mean, what Robert Downey Jr. did for that character, for Tony Stark and Iron Man, I don't think. I mean, he gets a lot of credit. He was paid handsomely, but I still don't think he gets enough credit for the impact, because if Iron Man bombs, I don't know if they have as many of these films going forward. But, Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man, they had a home run with the first one, and that leads to what? Captain America and Thor, and then the first Avengers, and you get an Ant-Man, and then what they did with Guardians of the Galaxy. And I mean, like, you talk about like D-list characters, right? And they turned it into the biggest blockbuster of the summer a few years ago, and they got a sequel out of it. It's unbelievable how they've woven that story through 23 movies or 22 movies. It's incredible. And honestly, you'd be hard pressed to sit there. Like, you can say, I like this movie better than that one, and this was okay, but they hit a home run, like absolutely nailed pretty much all of them.
All of them.
Like, you kind of walked away from every movie going, man, that was great. Like the first Avengers movie, to wait for that and the buildup and like to hit that home run, like, wow. I mean, to compare it to like the, Endgame, it's, tough to compare now, but like that first time you saw Iron Man and Hulk and Thor and Black Widow and Cap and Hawkeye all kind of ready to go, and you're like, all right. I mean, to nail that, and then to all these, to get to that finale, to what everybody's been waiting for, and to nail that finale, that Avengers Endgame. Like, I put it on the other night just to watch, and just like, Cap, Avengers, assemble. Oh man, I've watched it probably like 10 times now, and my eyes water up like, yeah, go get him, like.
I watched Iron Man the other night and was like, fuck yeah, this movie's just so badass, man. It's just the best.
Like those two scenes in the last few years, like the Mandalorian finale of season 2 here.
Yeah, deadly serious.
I mean, I won't spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but like that and the end of Endgame. Oh, like,
so
there's anticipation and there's hype, and when it actually delivers, you're just like, yeah.
And what did you think when they announced that Robert Pattinson was going to play Batman?
Well, I never read the Twilight books, and so my first thought was like, oh boy, Team Edward, really, or whatever. But man, it works, to kind of see how, he looks at, to me, I think an important element to wearing the cowl is you need to have a bit of the jaw, right? Like, yeah. I got a little bit of a turkey neck here. So like, I just couldn't pull off Batman. Right. And I recognize that early. I just don't have that square jaw. which is why I got a little bit.
So you won't be auditioning for that, but you will be for the Pirates of the Caribbean.
That's it. I'll be a great Jack Sparrow stand-in or stunt double to get blown up in a ship. But no, I think from what I've seen from Pattinson and from the trailer, he looks legit, man.
It looks pretty good,
like,
right?
Like I look, I always look at Ben Affleck as the guy from Mallrats. Do you remember that movie, Mallrats?
Great movie.
Yeah, but like Affleck's character, he plays like the biggest D-bag, right?
Just a total douche.
Total. And so it's always tough to kind of shake that. It's like Bradley Cooper. I still, no matter how good, and man, he was great in The Star Is Born, but Bradley Cooper to me is still the guy from The Wedding Crashers. Right? Like just that total D-bag, right? You just got to think that, there's probably, an extension of his personality that kind of just lends for that dude to be a bit of a dick. And so, which makes him a great actor. But Affleck, as much as I cringed when I saw him being cast as Batman initially, I thought, man, how do you go with that guy? And I thought he was, I might say like, he might be the best Bruce Wayne. And Bale killed it, right?
Bale,
I didn't love his voice. Bale, the only thing I didn't like was I didn't like that. I just didn't like the fact that he wanted to tell everybody to smarten up like that. But I thought,
why is that?
Why? But you know what? Grizzled Batman, Ben Affleck, I thought he nailed it. I think Pattinson's going to be all right. I think he's obviously a little prettier because he's younger, but I think Pattinson's got a chance to hit a real home run here. I'm very optimistic. I felt like I was always judging, like Michael Keaton, as good as he was, I didn't feel like Keaton had the job. I think that's important.
Yeah. What superpower would you want to have?
Oh, man, flight feels like a tough one to beat.
Teleportation? Time travel?
Time travel. Yeah. You know what? As somebody who's a big fan of history, I would love to kind of experience some of that.
Where would you go? Where would you want to go first time?
Oh, wow. Where would I want to go?
Right. Like how fucking rad would that be to go to, I don't know, go to the 1800s.
Well, that's it, man. Like honestly, to see, that I look at like this country and go 150 years ago as this country was taking shape, kind of the period around the Civil War in America. And just, man, it's just a fascinating time that ultimately in the backdrop kind of 1860s where this country gets settled. I think
walking down the fucking street.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what, man. Like I love the stories of. I love a good Western movie, and to kind of experience what like the Wild West would have been like some of those towns. But the reality is, man, just the volatility. Like we talk about how people behave now. When you think about, you get in a disagreement, you get shot. Right?
What did you just say to me?
Were you cheating in cards? Bang! But and then the great thing is how many people had bad shots, right? It's just like, it's all these stories of these generals or outlaws that just had like 5 to 10 bullet wounds, and you didn't exactly have the medical care that we do now, and live to tell. Oh, I got a graze here in my shoulder. I got one in my hip, one in my leg, and I think the 1860s would be kind of. I'd be down with checking out. I'd love to go check out like the medieval times as well, and just to kind of go, kind of Saxon England, and to see that. And I'll tell you this, like as a kid who was raised Catholic, I don't, not exactly one that practices and haven't for a long time, but man, I think like going back to the Middle East or going to Jerusalem and Bethlehem, or kind of all that history you kind of heard about as a kid, and maybe kind of get a clarification on what's fact and what's fiction,
Yep.
Okay, yep. All these, certain people were talking about, and like, okay, were they legit? Like, where can I find this guy? And
right,
and
what's his address again? Right. Okay.
Where's that carpenter? And where's that Virgin Mary? And so just to maybe see if just to kind of just get some clarification, for the
I could see
Department of
somebody
Clarification.
would want to scratch that itch.
Yeah, like,
Little
okay,
bit, sure.
where's Noah live? Where do you park that ark? And so
See how big that ark is, anyway.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're getting 2 of every animal in there, that's got to be a big motherfucking boat.
Pretty big ark. All right, James, let's wrap it up. What's the most overrated band on the planet?
Let's say hold on, it's coming to me. I feel like the Beatles.
Fucking hate mail is coming your way, buddy.
I don't know, man. Like, just the simplicity. Like, there's some really beautiful songs, in the later years, but and the simplicity of some of those songs, are they really that good?
James is easy to find on social media to bag on. Simply his name. It's great to see you, buddy. Let's make this beers, when the COVID takes a hike.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think
long.
the encouraging thing that is to hear that at least 4 people I know with their family and people in the neighborhood that have been vaccinated. So at least it's happening, and to know that, okay, there's people I know that it's actually, so it's, it's the steps are taken. Yeah, it's happening. Yeah. And I'm sure we'd all like for it to be a lot faster than it is, but it's happening, and that's a step in the right direction. But yes, it has been way too long. And thanks for letting me fill up your airwaves, buddy.
Always, man. Okay, bud. We'll see you online, and thanks again for doing this.
Peace and love, buddy. Stay safe out there.
Take care, James.
Bye, handsome.
Okay, bye.